There's a lot of joy to be found in making something and sharing it. While plenty of people write or draw only for themselves, a great many do so they can show what they've created to others. People like to talk about the ideas they've had and discuss all their favorite parts of the work. And there's a simple pleasure of having someone compliment your creations. One of the best feelings is coming across people who share your interests so you can really go into detail. Share all the little bits and pieces of lore and world building the average person might not be interested in, maybe even someone to collaborate with. A collaborative creative project comes with great opportunities but also significant challenges. Getting to share in the creative process can be fun. You have someone there who's just as knowledgeable and as deeply invested in your interests as you are. And two heads are better than one. With one or more additional people working together, you'll often come up with a far greater variety of ideas. And of course, the ability to divide tasks can't be understated. The ability to specialize is one of humanity's greatest strengths, and if each member of a group has a different focus, they can contribute that expertise to create a greater whole. But that same combination of creativity and interest creates the problems in collaborating. Clashing artistic visions and disagreements over what should be focused on can quickly bring a project to an end. How the group meshes together and what sort of organization is necessary depends a lot on how they were brought together in the first place. There's a big difference between a group of friends or a handful of strangers on the internet collaborating or a massive shared universe. While small collaborations are likely more common, it's the large projects that are most well known. Collaborative worlds like the SCP universe of the Backrooms, or open source games like Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead or Bitburner. These are contributed to by hundreds or even thousands of people. That level of work allows them to be far more expansive, but usually at the cost of a centralized vision. People will tend to stick to the initial theme that brought them in, but everyone has their own opinion on how exactly that theme is best executed. At the scale of the SCP Foundation, centralized control is near impossible, and it will often be the collective will of the community that decides what stays. And rightfully so, since with so many people contributing, it wouldn't make sense for one person to suddenly claim ownership or control. All of which brings us finally to Anbennar. Anbennar is a fantasy total conversion mod for the grand strategy game Europa Universalis 4. EU4 itself is a historical game. It starts in the year 1444 and lets players select any country on the map to play. From there, it's a semi-historical sandbox as the player interacts with a changing world from the early Age of Discovery through to the Age of Revolutions and the game's end date in 1821. EU4 has many different sorts of mods. Total conversion mods specifically are mods which completely change the game's setting. That includes alternate histories playing out on Earth, new histories on other realistic planets, adaptations of fictional worlds into EU4, or new fantastical worlds. Anbennar is an example of the last one. A high fantasy realm that takes a kitchen sink approach to world building, with a little bit of everything to be found. It's an impressive project with a huge scope for a mod, that does a lot of interesting things with its fantasy setting, and acts as an excellent example of the power of collaborative world building. The world of Anbennar takes inspiration from the real world. Its lands resemble the general layout of Earth. That is excellent for it being an EU4 mod, since it makes it easier to mesh into EU4's game systems. Anbennar's worldbuilding takes a number of standard high fantasy tropes and leans into them heavily before putting its own spin on things. I know tropes are currently considered somewhat of a hot topic, but I'm firmly in the camp that tropes are good when used correctly. Things get popular and become tropes because they're good at something, and Anbennar knows how to embrace that for its kitchen sink setting. In the combination of influences from real life and fantasy, the central region of Anbennar, Canor, is an analogue to the Holy Roman Empire that plays a central role in the time period of EU4. Inhabited by a combination of humans, elves, gnomes, and other races, Canor is a land of knights, magic, and adventure. The eastern parts, Escan, are a region with a deep history that is being rebuilt after devastation during a massive war. Beyond it, the Serpentine Mountains are home to dwarves and goblins. Once a great dwarven empire, now only remnant holes remain after they dug too deeply and too greedily. The rest of the world continues in similar trends. The lands of Keterata mimic Egypt and border a Near East that is home to sun elves and gnolls, And to the far east, orders of martial artists and cultivators live in lands that are home to multitudes of spirits. Every part of the world of Anbennar draws on the real world and fuses it with fantasy elements commonly drawn from that region. Where Anbennar truly starts to shine is in the unique elements of its setting. This is best found in the details of each nation and region. The adventurer nations of Escan each draw upon a unique history that explains what they are adventuring after. They draw on the glory of kingdoms that stood before the Orc invasion and now seek to reclaim both their own legacy and the legacy of Castan's empire, an ancient realm that encompasses the whole region. Each dwarven hold across the Serpent Spine has its own character. They each had a specialty or a unique trait as part of the Dwarven Empire, and their missions, unit descriptions, national ideas, and unique events all play a part in that. Examples can be found in every region. Details, stories, and flavor that make every area and almost every one of the hundreds of nations unique. This is an excellent, and as far as I know, unintentional approach to world building. By leaning into well-established tropes on the large scale, the mod remains accessible to people new to the setting, but once you zoom in on one nation to play, you explore a rich story that interweaves with the neighboring countries. Going through the entire setting and lore of Anbennar would take hours, but thankfully I don't need to. If you look at a location and consider its rough Earth or fantasy analog, you'll probably get the right idea of its character. The Forbidden Plains are located across the continent and inhabited by centaurs. They obviously draw inspiration from the Mongols, and the nations there are focused on cavalry warfare. The lands of Greenscale and Redscale are inhabited by kobolds, and as kobolds tend to, there's dragons involved in their stories. Everywhere has something going on, and this is Anbennar's greatest strength as a collaborative project. Having discussed the world-building side of collaborative world-building, what the mod team has achieved, let's take a look at the collaborative side, the mod team itself. The development of Anbennar is run from an open Discord server. Here people can join and discuss the mod, look at upcoming features, report bugs, and, if they're so inclined, contribute. I talked earlier about huge projects like SCP essentially letting anyone make something, and it's down to community approval whether it ends up on the wiki. Making a mod requires a somewhat higher level of coordination and teamwork. The mod is headed by J-Bean, who came up with the world of Anbennar originally. New people who want to contribute have access to a sort of onboarding document, which details how the team is structured. Anyone can contribute, but if you're new, there's an expectation that more experienced members of the mod team will supervise you. This is a lot more in line with what you see in video game projects that are open to contribution. With the potential to break things with your code, someone has to be doing reviews and approving changes. But overall, the bar to entry is pretty low. A potential contributor checks with the person in charge of the area they want to work in, if it's even open to change. Then they draft a proposal for the changes. Someone looks over it, and if there's no problem, they get to work making it and submitting the change. The process of learning how to script in EU4 and writing the change will take up much more time than getting a contribution approved. But as far as modding goes, EU4 is a lot more accessible than most games. It doesn't require you to learn an actual programming language, and the script is, if not straightforward, intuitive enough for someone who's never programmed before to take a shot at it. As a community project, whether content gets made and how much there is comes down to how interested and passionate the community members are. That can be a struggle when something needs doing that no one is interested in, be it developing some region that no one is currently keen on, or handling the background work necessary to make the mod work. A world-building project that was all maps, art, and lore wouldn't have this problem, but to make Anbennar work, you need both people doing creative writing and people turning those ideas into game systems. The population system is one example of this. It's easy enough to write a list of fantasy races you want to include, but programming a system to represent their presence in every one of the thousands of provinces is a task that asks for a very different set of skills and interests. But all these difficulties directly highlight what makes Anbennar work, and what is the great strength of collaborative worldbuilding. The mod team has been able to find people interested in each aspect, people willing to put in the hours to flesh out both mechanics and story, and the result has been a world with a shocking amount of depth. One of the greatest weaknesses of many kitchen sink style settings is how shallow they can be. The easy familiarity allows authors to throw a little world building out there and then focus entirely on their story, since the audience can fill in a lot of things on assumptions and familiarity with the tropes and inspirations. But Anbennar doesn't do that. It gives you the familiarity of fantasy knights and bands of adventurers, and then sits you down to learn the history of Emperor Castan, all 53 of them. It is worth commenting on, when discussing a creative project, the medium and genre of the work. These have a lot more impact than I think they are sometimes given credit for. Writing a military fiction novel is very different from a mystery, and a story designed for a narrative game might not translate into a TV show. It's one of the many reasons why adaptations of a work often struggle, even with the best intentions by their creators. I've already mentioned how, as a mod, contributing to Anbennar requires more oversight than other projects. Rather than just not fitting into the lore, a poorly made change that doesn't get reviewed can break the game. A well-made change, however, can greatly enhance the experience in ways that aren't open to other mediums. Modding EU4 allows artists, writers, and programmers to all express their skill and collaborate for a better overall result. The Anbennar mod has a few features that particularly express that, one of which is how Anbennar shows its fantasy world is inhabited by more than humans. It would be easy enough to abstract away the presence of dwarves and elves as background lore. Simply imply that certain countries, like those in the mountains, are inhabited by dwarves and goblins and leave it at that. Or use a little flavor text to tell a story. EU4 gives countries missions to fulfill that tell a story of what that nation historically achieved or would have liked to achieve. That's a perfect place to put a few offhand mentions that a particular country is run by kobolds. But Anbennar devotes a huge amount of effort, more than some dev teams might consider reasonable, to making everything feel unique. Each nation has modifiers, both bonuses and debuffs, based on its majority population, and a separate modifier for the nature of its military. These can be augmented by integrating other races, first in a population mechanic, and then again for the military in government reforms. The population mechanic itself plays a huge role. It showcases the presence of the largest groups of each race present in a given province. This system represents a huge amount of effort on the part of programmers working on the mod. An effort that is further supported by artists creating unique portraits of each race, so the player experiences firsthand the diversity of their nation when hiring advisors, as well as art for missions and unique events. All of which is again supported by pages upon pages of flavor text in every part of the game. Even the unit descriptions have been filled out, and most players don't even realize those exist. It's the special kind of madness you find in projects like Dwarf Fortress, where someone has decided they want things done right. And unlike studio games that have to ship at some point so they can make money, a passion project can go into all the depth it wants to. An entire unique mechanic for one nation because it suits its flavor? Completely unreasonable in any other context. But in a community project, if someone really loves that one country and wants to put their time in, they can make it happen. Of course, nothing is all upside. It's worth remembering certain risks when doing collaborative creative work. A key figure losing interest or having other commitments pull them away can have a knock-on effect. There may not be anyone else available who has their skill set or knows as much about that area of the lore to fill in for them. And if they were working with others who were reliant on that person's content to continue their own, they might leave as well if no one can pick up the slack. In this way, community projects are a little more vulnerable to having pieces of content left on the wayside. You trade having a single point of failure, a single author, or a larger system that's more likely to carry on, but will shift focus in unpredictable ways. Most of my videos, I hope, act as inspiration. I want people to see all the options out there and find something that interests them, something that spurs on their creativity. But I also often try to demonstrate where some people's limits or interests are and suggest alternative routes, ways to leave out the bits you don't like and hone in on what you want to do. Knowing what you can do and what you want to do is sometimes as important as knowing when to push yourself, when to step out of your comfort zone or buckle down and get the less fun but still necessary work done. Collaborative world building really exemplifies all those ideas. You work together with others because you can accomplish more together. Anbennar was J. Bean's world originally, and he didn't have to take the route he did. He could have worked on the mod alone, or kept much stricter control of who would contribute and what they would be allowed to add. And if he had, Anbennar as it is wouldn't have been possible. It would still have been a great world-building project. He had a hell of a lot of stuff already made, but the mod we have today could not have been made by one man in the time it's taken. It's a beautiful example of what people can accomplish together and how being creative can cover so many skill sets. You don't have to be an author or an artist. It has taken authors, artists, translators, programmers, localizers, balance testers, and more to bring the world of Anbennar to such vivid life.